1 out of every 4 Israeli citizens is living in poverty. Among those are 850,000 hungry children.
Ray and Rosalind MacDonald are with us today to share about how Leket, Israel, Israel's national food bank, is working to help those in dire need.
Could it be that Christians and Jews working together is the fulfillment of prophetic scripture?
Stay with us. This is Lifeline Today. Welcome to Lifeline Today. Glad you've joined us with the program. And today on our program we have two people, Ray and Rosalind MacDonald. Welcome.
Welcome to
Shalom.
both of you.
Shalom Aleichem.
Shalom.
Great to be here with you.
Yes,
Yeah.
that'd be more appropriate, wouldn't it?
Yes, it would.
We're going to talk a little bit. Well, tell us briefly about Leket Israel. We are going to talk more in detail later in the program. But tell us what you do.
Leket Israel is Israel's national food bank. We provide food for Israel's poor. Leket is a biblical expression. It's a Hebrew word, and it means to glean. It's a biblical commandment, first appearing in the book of Leviticus and Deuteronomy. And it's basically enabling the poor to be able to receive food. It's exactly what Ruth did in the fields of Boaz.
Mm-hmm.
Remember her,
Yes.
her Jewish mother-in-law, Naomi, left to come back home to Israel. They didn't have anything. They had no wealth. And so she went in the fields of Boaz and did the work of Leket. So precisely, what does it mean?
Yeah.
It's the gleanings. God said to Israel, you're not to Leket all of your harvest. You're to leave the Leket. Any produce that would fall to the ground as the harvesters would go through, as soon as that fruit or vegetable would hit the ground, it no longer belonged to the farmer, to the harvester.
Yeah.
So Ruth came in behind the harvesters and picked up the gleanings. So there's kind of a modern adaptation on that. So we can talk a little bit about that.
The numbers there of 850,000 receiving this.
850,000
Children.
hungry children.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's over 1/3, 36% of Israel's children are not receiving the nutrition that they need to have on a daily basis.
It's very hard to those of us that have been there to understand, because there seems to be such abundance.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's right.
It's a land of abundance.
Yeah.
It appears to be.
Well, yeah, it's interesting, fascinating statistic that Israel is the only country in the world that began this century with more trees than it had the beginning of the previous century.
Right.
We know that deforestation is happening,
Yeah.
right? Even desertification, deserts are growing in the world. But the land in Israel that was desert for so long is blooming once again.
It's beautiful.
And really, it's, paradoxically, even though there are hungry Israelis, there's actually a surplus of food in Israel, just like Canada.
Yeah.
Right.
Every day, for every single Canadian, at least 1 pound of food winds up in Canada's landfill. So, it's 34 million pounds of food per day.
A pound per person.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So, similar situation in Israel. There's food wastage.
Now I want to just, I'm sorry,
No,
I interrupted.
I was just going to say, what we do as an organization is we rescue
Yeah.
that surplus food, and we distribute to 180 nonprofit organizations that work with the poor, like soup kitchens, food banks, homeless shelters.
Yeah.
That's
that sort of
amazing.
Well, it's amazing, isn't it?
I want to just back up a little bit, though, because I'm looking at you today. Your last name is MacDonald. It's not a Jewish name, and you're from Nova Scotia.
Originally from Nova Scotia.
Nova Scotia.
There
All right.
must be a story of how you got involved in working with Leket and your heart for the Jewish people.
Mm-hmm.
Well, actually, in the year 1980, prior to Ray and I getting married. I should say it would have been more in 1982. I was in Nova Scotia, and Ray was actually in Calgary, Alberta at the time.
All
And-
right, Calgary, Ray.
And the Lord laid upon my heart one day. He said, Rosalind, I want you to fast and pray until 2 o'clock, and I have something that I want to tell you. And I said, okay, Lord. And I thought, well, that's no big deal, just to fast till 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I'm used to fasting longer than that.
Yeah.
So 2 o'clock that afternoon, the Lord spoke to my heart, and he said, Rosalind, I am going to be sending you to Israel. And I said to the Lord, I said, well, if I'm going to Israel, I really hope Ray will be going with me. And I said, I never heard him really express any desire for Israel. And so that day, it was 12 o'clock my time and 9 o'clock his time. He phoned me up, and he's from Calgary. And he said, Rosalind, he said, I've been fasting and praying today. And he said, the Lord wants me to tell you that, yes, we will be going to Israel together.
Wow.
So it was really something, because this past Sunday we were able to give the message of Israel to Calgary, where, you know, where there was the connection there. But
Where
then
it
back,
began for us.
yeah, and then back in 2007, I was fasting and praying again, and as I was fasting and praying, the Lord spoke to me and said, prepare for Israel, just like that. And I was praying about something entirely different, and I said, what, Lord? The Lord said, prepare for Israel, prepare for Israel.
Is that an Israeli
Yeah,
accent?
I don't know. Well, I
That's an
know
Israeli-
I know
Israeli
some
accent.
people from the north of
Most
Israel
likely.
that have that sort of an accent, so that's kind of what I connected with. But anyway, I said, well, when, Lord? And the Lord said, tell Ray that you will be leaving what you are currently doing. And we were working for another organization at the time that loved Israel, and we were educating the church about Israel.
Right.
And so we left that area of employment in March, and in May, the Lord said that, reiterated again, that we would be working with a charitable organization, and that we would be helping to feed the poor of Israel now. And we didn't even know who we were going to be working with.
Yeah.
A
And we
leap
looked-
of faith.
A leap of faith, and there
Wow.
was a list of projects on the internet that we looked at. And Ray said to me, what do you think of this one? And as soon as he mentioned Leket, my spirit just jumped. I said, that's the one, we need to contact that one. So Ray phoned them, and a few
We
days
sent
later,
an email. We got a call a couple of days later. Yeah.
yes, from our
Leket's the director of
Development.
development, Paul Lebo.
yes, an Australian who had made Aliyah. And he asked what we wanted to do. He said, what did you have in mind? And we
Yeah.
said, well, we thought we would inform the churches about Israel's poor, and, you know, that
Yeah.
we would make it well known. And he said, well, he said, we've never had any Christians on board, but we've been talking about this past week in our office that we would love to have a Christian organization who would be on board to help. And just prior to that, it was really something, because there was another gentleman by the name of John Housen, and who was with Bridges for Peace at the time. He was
Right.
the director for
We've
Bridges
met
for
him, yeah.
Peace, yes. And anyway, he went to introduce us to some people, and he said, this is Ray and Rosalind MacDonald. They work to help feed Israel's poor. And we hadn't told anybody what we were going to do. So we took that as further confirmation
Confirmation,
from the
cool.
Lord. So
Yeah.
that's
It
how it
sounds
happened.
like you really were directed, you know, by specifically, like some people don't get direction that specific to do something, but in
Yeah.
this particular case, you were. Do you think there's any significance to the time, 2007, that you were directed to do this, or was it just the timing of the Lord?
Yeah,
The timing of the Lord, I think.
yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
The
So-
first time you went to Israel, what did you do? Did you go as a tourist, or did you go to volunteer and help, or what was your experience there?
My first visit to Israel, my
Yeah.
first trip to Israel, wow.
Or the
that's-
first time that you both went together?
Okay,
I'm-
well, even my first trip was
Okay.
pretty interesting as
Okay.
well, but we went together in September, was it, of 2007. We just, they wanted us to see everything that, all the work, and we immersed ourselves in all the aspects of Leket, which was, it was interesting. I remember we went on a food delivery, a pickup and delivery with Serge, one of our drivers.
Yeah.
He is a Jew who made Aliyah from Switzerland.
Wow.
And what was so
So
memorable?
for viewers that don't know what that is, that's Aliyah is when
Oh, yeah, I'm
Jews
sorry.
return to the homeland, right?
Yep, to go up, a Jew returning home, they make Aliyah.
Yeah.
And so he is fluent in Hebrew and French. Okay, and Rosalind and I knew a little bit of Hebrew and a little bit of French.
Huh.
So we were speaking in French and Hebrew to like our sentence
mixed
sentence
together.
would
Half.
begin in Hebrew and would end in French. We had a great time with them, but yeah. So
I
we've-
probably think they look at MacDonald, that's Scottish, you're speaking French and Hebrew. That's an interesting mixture.
only God can come up with these things.
Yeah, so, but through those experiences, did you
Mhm.
fall in love with the Jewish people?
I've always been in love, with the Jewish people.
Yeah.
I think as a very young Christian in my teens, gave my heart to the Lord, but even as a child, it was impressed on me that Israel was significant, that Israel was special.
Mm-hmm.
After I gave my heart to the Lord, in my late teens, God just directed me to this older Jewish fella back home in Sydney, Nova Scotia.
Wow.
And it was really fascinating for me as a young believer to really get a Jewish perspective on my faith. Like I wanted to witness to this older gentleman and really just share the gospel with him. But he actually just opened up my faith so much more than I thought possible. And just realizing, that Jesus was a Jew.
Yeah.
He still is,
Isn't
in
it
my
amazing?
opinion. He still is Jewish.
Isn't it amazing that many Christians don't think of Jesus in that frame of reference?
It is amazing.
He was a full practicing Jew.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. And, even I was just sharing with the pastor in the church that we're in yesterday that Jesus didn't go to church. He didn't have a Christmas tree. He never ate an Easter egg. and the pastor actually had been invited a couple of years ago. A Jewish neighbor of his invited him to a Passover Seder in his home. And Passover Seder is what Jesus did, the Last Supper in Jerusalem. It's a meal that commemorates, and it's like a service as well, commemorates the Exodus. So I asked him, I said, how was it? How was the Seder?
Yeah.
He said, it was incredible.
Yeah.
I said, did you learn a lot? He said, yes. And that's really, when you just asked about the timing.
Yeah.
Christians are really wanting to know about Israel, wanting to connect to Israel, wanting to understand the Jewish roots
Yeah.
of their faith. And so it's really exciting time that we're living in right now.
We've led multiple tours to Israel in the past, and as many as 120 in our tour. But overwhelmingly, the response was always, this has changed my life.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's multiple reasons, of course, but one of the most important is the very things we treasure and hold so dear. You actually see the places and the things and the circumstances that surrounded those incredible biblical stories. And of course, the footsteps of Jesus. I think one of the most moving experiences for me was standing on the southern steps of the Temple Mount, which are still visible, those steps, and they're worn. They're worn from all the people that walked on them. And I was to stand there because Jesus taught from those steps on a number of times. And I was just amazed when I said to you, I'm standing right here on these rocks that are worn, and Jesus was standing here. The other place was in Capernaum, in his synagogue, where he stood and spoke about the Spirit of the Lord upon him and so on.
Yeah, you mentioned the southern steps, the Temple Mount. For sure, if there's anywhere in the country that we can say Jesus walked on these stones, that would be it.
That would be it.
But you know what? I remember a few years ago, I was with a group of pastors touring Israel, and we were standing like you've done so many times on the Mount of Olives, looking across the Kidron Valley to the Temple Mount.
Yeah.
And so I remember one time, you have so many times when you visit Israel, just these quiet aha moments that occur where God just really enlightened. So I felt, while I was standing there with these pastors, I just felt, Ray, look down at your feet. Maybe you're standing on stones that Jesus walked on, right? Because he would have walked across the Kidron Valley.
Yeah.
Right.
He would have maybe visited the Garden of Gethsemane,
Yeah.
gone over the Mount of Olives to Bethany, where his best friend Lazarus lived. And so I was thinking about that. I felt God just say to me again, you know, look down at your feet again. And I felt God say, maybe you're standing on stones, Ray, that Jesus is going to walk on in the future.
To fulfill the prophecy of entering the
Yes,
eastern gate.
amen.
And that's, you know, like, that's what Israel is to me. It's
Yeah.
got a very exciting past. For many Christians,
Yeah.
Israel is just a museum piece.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's got a thrilling present.
Yeah.
God's doing incredible things,
Yeah.
but its future is glorious.
Well, and I always think of Zechariah, where he says that when Messiah returns, he'll put his
Yes.
foot on the Mount of Olives and it will split
Yes.
in two. And we were on the Mount of Olives. And I was just up there, I was in amaze and wonder, this is the location. This is the location where this happens. We also know there's a spiritual return, of course, that the entire earth would know from the east to the west, the
Yeah.
scripture says. But it does specifically say that in Zechariah. We're going to continue with Ray and Rosalind. Lots to say about this. We're going to learn a little more about Leket Israel as well, and Christian organizations helping. So we got to kind of get into that. Why would they help? What's behind that? What principles behind that? I'm sure you'll be intrigued to hear that. Right now we want to share this with you, and we'll be right back.
Dominion Conference 2015 is coming up very soon. Mark these dates on your calendars. June 28th to July 1st in Calgary at Southside Victory Church. Join Dick and Joan along with special guests Francis Armstrong, Bill Prankard, Patricia King, Len Zodeman, and Craig Broker, along with Crystal Henderson for Kids Ministry and Ryan and Alyssa Caldwell and Charles Shortino leading worship. There is a registration for the conference this year. The early bird is $20 per person or $30 per family or couple, and that deadline is June 1st. After that, it'll be $25 per person or $35 per family or couple. For all the details, check out dickandjoan.com.
Matthew 18:19 says, if two agree on earth as touching anything, it shall be done by our Father in heaven. What's your anything today? What do you need done in your life? Call the prayer center right now, and the telephone prayer partners will agree with you for your need. The phone lines are open. Call 403-942-0123. Call right now.
Dominion Conference 2015 is coming up very soon. Mark these dates on your calendars. June 28th to July 1st in Calgary at Southside Victory Church. For all the details, check out dickandjoan.com.
Our prayer lines are always open. Great prayer center. Thank you, Jill, for just manning that, and all of her volunteers. And you need to know something. They follow up on everything. So if you call and you get our voicemail, just remember we have multiple lines, but if you get our voicemail, you will be followed up. You will be called back. You will hear from them either by email. And Joan, just amazing, isn't it, that we see that kind of intensity. We have some faithful people that do this. And you know what? Today could be your day of breakthrough.
Yes,
With us
that's right.
is Ray and Rosalind MacDonald, and we're talking about Leket Israel, which is the food bank, essentially, for Israel. And before we go further into digging into that, the first thought to me was this a foreign concept for Leket in 2007 to involve Christian representatives?
Yes.
So they weren't familiar with or comfortable with doing this prior?
Well, I think, like we were talking earlier about it just really being a God's timing. Rosalind mentioned we were contacted by Paul Liba, Leket Israel's Director of Development, and he said, we've been hearing some things are happening in the church. Some of you Christians are really wanting to bless us.
Awesome.
And so, we met with Leket Israel's founder, who married a gal from Toronto. So we spent some time with him, and he said it just feels right.
Right.
It feels right. That's wonderful.
It does show you something, because we've been to Israel a number of times, that many Israelis they have barriers. They have walls up to the whole ideology of Christianity, Christians helping Israel, even though their economy is hugely supported by Christians visiting and touring.
Yeah.
Still, there's that barrier for many.
Yeah.
And but now it's encouraging to hear how many practicing Israelis, Jewish people, are understanding that there's a huge segment of the Christian church that want to bless them that feel that they are a very important part of God's prophetic timeline.
Yes.
And they believe it's a divine circumstance of God, that God was wanting to bring the Jews and the Christians together. And they'll also tell you that they know the times of the Messiah are here because of the love that the Christians are showing the Jewish people.
Yeah.
That's really,
So that's
really
amazing.
awesome.
I often connected with them when they say, look at Isaiah the prophet said that the Gentiles would come and bring blessing to you. This is how this is happening today. And they go, oh yeah, you know.
Of course, they've been waiting 2,000 years for that prophecy to be fulfilled.
I know.
I mean, it's really such a huge subject. I mean, to us as Christians, the cross is a sign of love. It's a sign of God's salvation for us. Unfortunately, though, you know, to the Jewish people, the cross means something radically different. As
Many times.
in the name of Christ, so many nasty things were done.
Yeah.
But now, you know, the walls are coming down. And I believe that I'm a living example of perhaps the most exciting thing that God's doing on the planet right now. And that's bringing Christians and Jews together after centuries of animosity.
I've got to say, when we've gone multiple times, as I said, you just feel at home. And that's really quite bizarre because, you know, even the very first time I went there, I just almost had to pinch myself. This feels like it's so right. And you just have this fluid engagement with all of the inhabitants. And I said to Joan, it almost feels like you're living in a biblical nation, you know, or a Christian nation in one's form, you know, when it's not. We understand that it's a political state and so on. But it is unique when you're there. And discussing the Messianic times, you know, I can remember many times thinking, you know, everything is identical except the timing of when Messiah comes. You know, that's about the only difference we have. So yes, let's talk about Leket.
Let's get back to Leket. And I read something in your material about the redistribution of excess food to the needy, and I thought, what a wonderful idea, because when we've been there, the food is so plentiful, and you do wonder what happens to all this leftover food when you know, the restaurants shut, say at 10 o'clock in the evening or whatever. I want you to talk about that, and also to tell us, who are these hungry, needy people in the land of Israel? 1 out of 4, you say, is living in poverty. Who are the people that you're actually ministering to?
Okay, so we can talk about the first part of your question. I'll tell you a little story of how Leket came into existence.
Okay.
It's really a neat story. Joseph Gidler, a Jew from New Jersey, made Aliyah, went home to Israel in the year 2000 with his family. Successful lawyer. His family had a software company in Israel. And so after he was living in Israel for 3 or 4 years, when he decided he wanted to take a little bit of time, take a bit of a sabbatical, and see how he can help, see what contribution he can make to Israel. Israelis, it's a national pastime for them to volunteer and be involved in various ways in contributing to the country. And of course, that we know about kibbutz movement and how Israel came into existence. So a lot of that spirit is still there. So he just visited some nonprofit organizations in his community. What do you need? How can I help? And in particular, he visited a homeless shelter, and they said, what we need is money so that we can buy the most basic necessities for our residents, like food. Now, right around that time, Joseph, a friend of his, had a son that was being bar mitzvah. And we know a little bit about Jewish weddings and bar mitzvahs, lots of music, lots of food, and lots of fun. And so at the end of it, he found that he found himself in the kitchen. He was just talking to friends and whatnot, and he walks into the kitchen, and he couldn't believe what he saw. Everybody has eaten. They ate again, and perhaps they ate again. Okay, what does he see in the kitchen? Food. Lots of food. And he asked the caterer, what are you going to do? with this food? And caterer said, well, the staff, they're going to have a bite to eat before they go home, and the rest is going to go into the garbage.
Wow.
And Joseph thought, this is, he remembered the homeless shelter.
Mm-hmm.
He said, can I take this food? It's going in the garbage anyway. The caterer said, fine, absolutely. He loaded up the trunk of his car, loaded up the back seat of his car, and guess what he does? He drives straight to the homeless shelter. What was left over from this bar mitzvah lasted them several days, the food in the homeless shelter. So before you know it, Joseph has a refrigerator in his garage. Then he has a second refrigerator in his garage. And then he's got a couple of people helping him out.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is 11 years ago.
Amazing.
And Leket now have 97 people on staff. We have a fleet of refrigerated trucks. So God has just really blessed, and the organization has grown.
Wow. So there's a lot of gleaning as well. It's not just redistribution of food, but there's a lot of other ways that the food is gathered and distributed.
Yep. Basically, there are three things that we do. There's hot meal rescue, which is how Leket began. We have an army of volunteers that go into restaurants, into hotels, into mall food courts at the end of it every day, and we take that leftover food and it's distributed immediately. Of course, it's hot, it's fresh, prepared food. But also we have farmers that will donate to us acres of land. Amazing. We'll get a call from a farmer on a Wednesday afternoon, and they'll say something like, I've had a spectacular asparagus crop. I have more than what I can sell. Bring your volunteers over next Tuesday. I'm going to give you 5 acres of land.
You know what? We're running out of time.
Okay.
And we're going to continue this in the next program. But it's amazing. I understand that it's not just Jews, but Arabs, Holocaust survivors, everyone in the land.
We have Sudanese refugees, anybody who is hungry.
Wow,
Feed them
that's
all.
awesome.
That's amazing.
I'm going to invite
So
you.
good.
You'll see the website on your screen, and you may be interested in supporting something like this. And of course, we're going to hear a little more from Ray and Rosalind in the next program. So we'll find out a little more about how this work is going. But even the story, how it starts, is really inspirational. Thank you for sharing with us today. That
Thank
was
you very much.
very awesome.
Glad
I
to
look
be
forward
with
to
you.
our next program with you.
Yeah.
And thank you for being a part of it. Remember, our prayer lines are there. And also remember, God is good.
All the time.
And all the time.
God is good.
See you next time.
Yeah. See you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
This program is supported by viewers like you, and we thank you for your partnership. We want to hear from you. Send us your prayer requests, praise reports, and comments on the program. Be sure to visit our website for up-to-date information or get in touch with us by email or phone. And don't forget to like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter.